So GcMAF is a human protein and a human right. And it's the king of immunotherapies. There's no immunotherapy in the world that can touch GcMAF. The big pharmaceutical companies have now come out with a new immunotherapy for people with cancer. It's very cheap. It only costs $100,000, and it extends your life by 3 months. That's it. And that, to them, is immunotherapy. We are obviously looking to completely eradicate cancer with GcMAF. We have clinics because we can't get a hospital behind us. We can only get better by practice. So we've had to found our own clinics. And as fast as we can find them, the authorities close them down. But we got from 5% success with terminal stage 4 cancer to 77% success with terminal stage 4 cancer as a result of experience in our own clinics. And that was largely achieved by Lynn Thayer, who's going to be the next speaker after me. So, on average, Lynn was getting a 25% tumour reduction per week, particularly in the first week as patients arrived in our Lausanne clinic and in the Guernsey clinic. We have quite astonishing success with pancreatic cancer, as Lynn will tell you. In our clinics, every single pancreatic patient, who typically have sort of 2 to 3 weeks to live, makes it to 3 months, at which point they have no symptoms of the disease, and some of them go on to become cancer-free. So 300 scientists from 8 nations have written 150 scientific research papers on GcMAF. A healthy human body makes about 100,000 cancer cells a day, and it's the GcMAF that you all have inside you, if you are healthy, that kills those cancer cells every day. So GcMAF is the protein that keeps us cancer-free. But if you get hit by stress or disease, pneumonia for example, it gives cancer or 50 other diseases a chance to stop your body producing GcMAF. You then lose the 6 attacks on cancer and the 11 attacks on the body in total that GcMAF has. And that collapses your immune system too. So you administer our GcMAF, your attacks on cancer immediately start up again, and your immune system is rebuilt to full strength in 3 weeks. We have over 11,000 patients in 80 nations, some direct, but mostly through 350 doctors and clinics, and some of you are here now. Some of our doctors are here now. So GcMAF will tend to eradicate stage 4 cancers in a year or perhaps a little bit more if the protocol is followed. And of course, it has no side effects. We used to make GcMAF from blood supplied by pharmaceutical companies who were buying it from people like the blood transfusion service. We can make it from milk, but as you heard from Rod, we're now making it as a recombinant protein and a polypeptide. It's a 24-step extraction process, and we then put it through 9 tests, and Rod showed you the 9 tests. GcMAF exists only in billionths of a gram, so it looks like a raindrop, which is our logo. There's a list of the 9 tests. So the first one is sterility, which we have always done out of house. We started off using the government's Health Protection Agency, and we always used to do our own internal endotoxin sterility tests as well. We use a protein quantification test. These are identity tests in the middle, electrophoresis, Western blot, 2 Western blots. And then the first of the the first of the activity assays to make sure it is actually working GcMAF. So we do a proliferation assay with macrophages, and then we do the 2 interesting ones with the films that Rod just showed you. So that's the one where we have macrophages and cancer cells, nothing happens. We add the GcMAF, and the macrophages eat all the cancer cells in 3 days. And that's on gcmaf.se/videos. And then the second one Rod showed you was the same experiment, but no macrophages added. So the cancer cannot be eaten. So instead, the GcMAF turns the cancer back into normal, healthy cells. And that's when we realized that GcMAF was doing more than just activating macrophages and rebuilding the immune system. If it's turning cancer cells back into normal, healthy cells, something else is going on. And then we started a number of experiments and found 9 other actions of GcMAF in the body. GcMAF was called CSF1 back in the 1980s, but Dr. Yamamoto very cleverly renamed it GcMAF, so it looked as though he was the first person to discover it. GcMAF is, of course, a misnomer, because GcMAF, we now know, does 10 other things besides just activating macrophages. But, it's 32 years, as Rod said, since GcMAF was discovered. It's still not out in the mainstream. We are easily the world's largest supplier. We've supplied 11,000 people, and there are 1 billion people in the world who can't make their own GcMAF. So of those 150 papers, 78 of them at the moment are republished on the US National Library of Medicine. And if you do a search, if you go to PubMed, just stick it into Google, you'll find the US National Library of Medicine, and then put in dbPMAF or GcMAF or vitamin D binding protein macrophage activating factor, which are its 3 names, you'll find 78 papers as of now. This is the paper that Rod showed you. This has been written by a Japanese research group. Well, actually, Japan's top 5 cancer research groups. And they're calling it vitamin D binding protein macrophage activating factor. Well, we call it GcMAF, but that's one of the 3 names. And of the 5 top cancer institutes here, the most important one is the Atomic Bomb Institute of Nagasaki University. They know more about cancer than anyone because the atomic bomb left hundreds of thousands of cancer cases, and their research paper is as authoritative as you can possibly get. And there's the picture that Rod showed you. At the top is tumors before treatment with GcMAF, and then at the bottom, tumors after treatment with GcMAF. And on the left there, you can see a silver tumor. That tissue that has become scar tissue. The tumour is no longer a tumour, it is scar tissue. So that little mouse was cured. So what are the 11 actions of GcMAF in the body? So we know the first two, the immune system and macrophages. The next one is apoptosis, suicide of cancer cells. It turns the cancer into normal, healthy cells. It stops metastases. Now, this is really important. If you have a biopsy or a mammogram, in a mammogram they squeeze the breast so hard they sometimes go black, and in a biopsy they break open cancer cells. In both a mammogram and a biopsy, they break open cancer cells which float around the body, and you die of metastases, secondaries, 2 years later. So these mammogram institutes, they go around the country in vans and they give people mammograms, and they're killing women. And they kill men with prostate, give men prostate cancer with biopsies. And the third way that you create cancer is by surgery. If you cut into a tumour, again, you free up cancer cells which float around the body and create secondaries, and you die 2 years later. You have to be on GcMAF if you are going to do any of these three things, because the GcMAF will stop the secondaries. No one knows this. I mean, we have hundreds of examples, but no one knows this. So GcMAF also increases energy at the mitochondrial level, which is relevant for chronic fatigue syndrome. We have fabulous success with chronic fatigue syndrome. We have this group in Chester called the Chester Mesh Group in England, and 70% of their patients, 70% of their members, I should say, become 85% free of chronic fatigue syndrome. That's to say they feel 85% perfect. Well, I never feel better than 70% perfect, so I think they're doing pretty well. GcMAF improves neuronal metabolism. Okay, you saw some of Rod's slides on the brain and brain cells. GcMAF improves the actions of neurons in the brain, and it creates them with glial cells. GcMAF plus glial cells will create neurons. GcMAF counters toxic effects. This was an experiment done at the University of Florence. They put cadmium, radioactive cadmium, in a petri dish with human cells. 75% of them died. They had another petri dish alongside, again with cadmium and GcMAF. Only 5% of the cells died. So, of course, we get on to the government in Japan. They're sending these people into the radioactive power stations after the tsunami, when the nuclear reactors were breaking down. And these guys desperately needed to have GcMAF inside them before they went into the nuclear reactors. And of course, we could never get hold of anyone in the Japanese government. You never can. And we never got anywhere. GcMAF also stops neuropathic strain from neurooxidative stress, which again is relevant for autism, but it's particularly relevant for the drug oxaliplatinum. Oxaliplatinum has such awful side effects, it's a cancer drug, that no one wants to take it. But actually, if you take GcMAF, the side effects of the oxaliplatinum go away. And then, hopefully the oxaliplatinum will then cure the cancer. But no, actually, you can take a shortcut. throw away the oxylated platinum and just take the GcMAF. And as Rod showed you, GcMAF improves neuronal connectivity. That was that slide where, firstly there was a slide with no connectivity, and then there was a circle of connectivity when the GcMAF was added. So those are the 11 actions of GcMAF in the body, 9 of which were discovered by us, by our group of companies. So we really are the leading GcMAF research group in the world. And of course, all of this we publish in research papers. We've published 33 scientific research papers, many of which have won awards. So here's a paper that shows GcMAF turning cancer cells back into normal cells. And we're just going to cover 3 things that it does. Here's a paper written by us, which shows that GcMAF stimulates cAMP formation and inhibits angiogenesis. What is angiogenesis? Angiogenesis is where blood vessels are built by cancer cells to get the food in that they need. What is the main food of cancer? In fact, cancer only eats one thing. It was discovered in 1924 by Dr. Otto Warburg. Can someone tell me the one and only thing that cancer eats? Sugar. And you go and see an oncologist, and not one of them will ever tell you, don't eat sugar. Not one. And of course, carbohydrates become sugar in the body, and you can't eat those either if you've got cancer. So angiogenesis is where the tumor is growing arteries inside itself so it can feed itself with its sugar. And GcMAF prevents the building of those arteries, and if you've already got them, it will cut them off. And here we see some arteries supplying, very tiny arteries of course, supplying a tumor cell, 29 on the left, and on the right, after treatment with GcMAF, there are only 10 blood cells. So that's 19 less with the application of GcMAF in the laboratory. Okay, so what are the 50 diseases that we've treated? Well, that's them. I don't know. They're on the website, of course. Everything is on the website. I'll pick out a few of the interesting ones. Acne, autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, cirrhosis of the liver, colitis, Crohn's, herpes, immune system damage, inflammation, LMBBS, lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune disease. GcMAF, we're always trying to uprate the immune system. Actually, GcMAF is an immune system regulator. It will downgrade the immune system if you have an autoimmune disease. It doesn't just fire up the immune system, it does both. Multiple sclerosis. There are a number of diseases where we get 50% success, and that's one of them. Multiple sclerosis, we've never improved the symptoms by more than 50%. And another one is Parkinson's. We've never got above 50%. Psoriasis is another one. We've cured a man in this room of psoriasis. And the first disease we ever cured was sinusitis. Minor little disease, But when we first made our first batch of GcMAF, we shipped it out on, we of course tested it. We knew it was good GcMAF before we sent it out. But on the 2nd of January 2011, we sent it out to our first ever patient, who was a man in America who had sinusitis. Now, he had had it for 15 years. He'd been to 10 different doctors. He'd done everything he could to get rid of it, got absolutely nowhere. 14 days of our GcMAF, for the first time in 15 years, he was completely cured of sinusitis. So we knew on the 16th of January that we had our first clinical result. Now, there's a company called Efranat, which has been given $4.5 million by the big pharmaceutical companies to trial GcMAF. Now, what worries us about this is in Israel, it is an Israeli company, they were selling GcMAF for $1,000 a shot. We are $56 a dose, but they were doing it for $1,000. No one improved. We were in touch with a group of 15 Jews inside of Israel. The whole lot died. None of them got better. So what is really worrying for us is this company started doing tests on GcMAF in 2014. They haven't published any results. Now, we had results in 14 days. So my question is this the same GcMAF, and does it not work? And is the reason they have been given $4.5 million by the big pharmaceutical companies so they can produce clinical results that fail? I'm quite sure that is what is going on. Right, so we'll just go on to cancers. And we've been successful with 33 cancers. Asbestosis was one in Guernsey. We had this woman who was quite close to death, terminal stage 4 asbestosis. She got better and better and better. 14 months in, she had no symptoms of cancer at all, was living a completely normal life. Then the Guernsey government became the only government in the world to ban GcMAF. She lasted 6 months and died. And that happened to 10 people in Guernsey. So there are a number of people on Guernsey who are terminal stage 4 cancer who we did completely cure, and they are as cancer-free as the rest of us, and they were not affected by the ban. They're still alive today. But there were about 15 people who were halfway through the treatment. And when the GcMAF was banned, 10 of them died. So bladder cancer, breast cancer, we've done a lot of breast cancer. Colon, kidney. GcMAF is brilliant for chronic kidney disease. In Nicaragua, they're using glyphosate to spray on fields. Monsanto Roundup glyphosate. It's a weed killer. 100,000 Nicaraguans have now died. And parts of Nicaragua are now known as islands of widows. There are no men. And GcMAF is brilliant with diseases of the liver, so we could probably do something in Nicaragua. We're great with liver cancer, really, really good. Our first ever cancer was ovarian. We had a girl called Gail Bray, who has often spoken at these conferences. She was our first ever terminal stage 4 cancer patient in 2010. And she had ovarian and lung, as the lung was the secondary. And she was on, what was the drug she was on? I can't remember, some cancer drug whose name may come back to me. And she stopped the drug because there are a number of drugs which block the action of GcMAF. And in 3 months, her lung cancer was completely gone and her ovarian had halved in size. Then she had a huge argument with her partner. They split up and the stress brought it all back again. And of course, back in those days, we really didn't know how to treat terminal stage 4 cancer. We learned a lot from her. And so 18 months later, we completely eradicated her cancer because we knew how to do it then. And so she was completely cancer-free. And then she's a gardener by trade. So she bought a weed killer. Guess which weed killer she bought? Monsanto Roundup glyphosate. And glyphosate, in parts per trillion, causes breast cancer. So we're now treating her for breast cancer, and it is now receding. And if you've got glyphosate in your garage, what you have to do is to find someone you don't like, tell them to go into your garage, pick it up, put it into their car, not your car, open all the windows, and drive back to the shop where you bought the glyphosate from. Ask for your money back and make the point that the shop is killing people. And if they won't do anything about it, tell them to leave the bottle of glyphosate there and run away. Don't bring it back. And that's the only way you can dispose of glyphosate. You can't do it yourself. So this particular girl very kindly went and had a mammogram. We took a picture of her breasts, which were jet black afterwards, and she had a biopsy. You know, I mean, she did everything she could to get cancer, so now we're having to cure her for the 3rd time. So 6.5 years later, she's still as fit as a fiddle. Prostate cancer, we've done a lot of those, and of course, pancreatic cancer. So on our system, we can get results. People who take 1 to 5 vials, they say they are improved in 43.77% of cases. People who take 10 or more vials say they are improved in 88% of cases. Now, in some cases, we have ultrasound scans we've taken of ourselves, or in some cases, we have their own doctor's scans before or after. But one thing seems to be very, very clear. The more GcMAF you take, the better off you are. Actually, in 80% of cases, we're talking about Galeic. In cancer there, it says 86% have improved. What's the significance of that statistic? Well, of course, most people with cancer die. If you are improving, you are not dying. So those 86% of the people are not dying, which is a colossal result without going down into the scans and further into the data. And here are some Guernsey results. I used to know every patient when we started. Now we have 11,000 and I hardly know any. But I know most of these. So the third one down there is breast cancer. That's a girl called Joanne Spinks, who also has spoken at these conferences. She was given 2 months to live by 3 sets of doctors, one set in England, 1 set in Guernsey, and 1 set in Belgium. She had breast cancer which had spread to her liver, and it was because of her liver that they said she only had 2 months to live. She was told to come and see me, and I said, well, you will be cancer-free in a year, but only if you do exactly what I tell you. And she did exactly what I told her, except she did drink 2 bottles of red wine every day. And red wine does have some good effects. It's not all bad. Red wine has resveratrol in it, which is anti-cancer. And after 11 months, she went and had a set of scans, and they told her she was cancer-free. A chap called Peter de Carteret, he came to us with prostate cancer with 3 weeks to live. He was in agony, and he couldn't walk really. He was clutching hold of furniture to move around the room. His wife had placed an order for a mobile chair with a battery operated. And in 6 weeks he was pain-free and walking an hour a day just for the hell of it. After a year, he had no signs of cancer, and he would have become cancer-free, and then Guernsey banned GcMAF, and he died. It took him about 3 months to die after they banned the GcMAF. The autism one there, the first of the autism ones, the mother wrote a letter to the Guernsey press commending us for what we had done. She had a daughter with very severe non-verbal autism. She did it at home, and in 6 weeks the child no longer had autism. And we realized she didn't have autism when she said to her mother in front of us, and she'd never been able to speak before, she said, "It's all about you, isn't it? You don't care about me. What about my life? You haven't considered me at all." So we realized then, yeah, this girl is now verbal. We don't know it was a good verbal, but she was definitely verbal. This was our first ever prostate cancer case. He was a Gleason 9. Oh, Pete de Carteret, the chap I told you about before, who his wife bought a wheelchair for, he was a Gleason 10. Not many people make it to prostate Gleason 10. But this guy was prostate Gleason 9, PSA of 764.5, metastases in the bone, and given 4 to 6 months left to live by Dr. Anderson in Texas, who said there was no hope. So he very sensibly changed his doctor and went to our Dr. Blasius in Texas, also in Texas, who used GcMAF. So his PSA came down 98% to 10.9 in 5 months. And that's a fairly typical case, but that was our first. Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet has treated 2,000 autistic kids with our GcMAF. He started off with a 15% success rate, although 85% did improve, if only a little, but 15% became autism-free. With Galaic, that went up to 25%. And then with the ultrasound technique, he was getting 60% success. 60% of his patients no longer had autism if he treated them with ultrasound. Of course, if alternative treatments, which are inexpensive, replace pharmaceutical drugs, the pharmaceutical industry will no longer be making 200 billion in profits a year. There's the monoplate. That is solid cancer cells on that plate. Rod showed you some of this. And this is the same plate 3 days later, and all that's left on the plate is macrophages. Macrophages are these little round dots, and they're all coalesced together. And those macrophages, where they're coalesced together, are full of dead cancer cells. They've eaten all the cancer cells. So this is one of the 33 papers that we have written ourselves. this particular one is about GcMAF and breast cancer apoptosis, the committing of suicide by cancer cells. It was done in our laboratory as an experiment, and it is in the top 5% most read scientific research papers of all time. It's not the most interesting one we've done by a long shot, but I don't know why, but that is the most read. This is another one we've written, how GcMAF reduces nagalase in patients with advanced cancer. And of course, back then, that was sort of following on for the Yamamoto days, when a reduction in nagalase was the only evidence they had that the cancer was decreasing. Well then, of course, when we got our own clinics, we started using ultrasounds. We could actually measure the tumours before and after. And of course, when patients very helpfully get a scan of their own, be it a PET scan or an MRI or an X-ray, before and after, of course, that's particularly useful. So in the clinics, we reduce tumours at the rate of 25% a week, but of course it's a decreasing curve, because in the second week, you're only getting rid of 25% of 75%, and in the third week, you're getting rid of 25% of 55%. So it pays to come definitely for the first week, sometimes for 3 or 4 weeks, but never more than that. And then you go home and do the protocol. Well, at least you should go home and do the home protocol, but 30% don't. They get home, they say, "Whippy, my cancer's decreased," and they don't do anything at all. So here's another paper published in the American Journal of Immunology. So this is the results of 7 patients in our Swiss clinic. And the big pharmaceutical companies have a 2.9 billion so-called lobby spend. And what they do is they finance other organizations, or they put their men on the boards of other nations to sabotage effective, inexpensive treatments. And we have been subjected to a huge amount of that. And there's this website, it's called scholarya.com, where this chap criticizes this paper, saying we published it in a predatory journal. I don't think the people at the American Journal of Immunology would like being called a predatory journal. I don't know how you become predatory. Do you just buy a copy of the film Predator 2, or do you buy AK-47s? I don't know. But of course, he makes out that's the only paper we've ever written. Well, actually, we've published in over a dozen journals, and the most prestigious as far as cancer is concerned is the Journal of Anti-Cancer Research, in which we have about half a dozen papers. But this is quite an interesting paper, and here are before and after scans. So this first one here, there's a 50% tumor reduction in 2 weeks with Galeg. Everything we do ourselves, we do with Galeg. And here's another one, 28% reduction in how long? 1 week. And here is one of our papers in the Journal of Anti-Cancer Research. And most of our names are up there. Even my name's up there. And here we show scans of patient with tumor reduced 27% in 1 week. Well, 4 days actually. And the second one is 28% in 4 days.
David, I was interested completely about your talk, but especially my interest was to the 100,000 cells of cancer a healthy person makes a day.
Yes.
Do you have some reference for that?
No. I mean, I've read it in some scientific journal, but I can't tell you which one. But every human being makes between 10,000 and 100,000 cancer cells a day. Does anyone have a reference to that?
If anyone has a reference, I'd like to hear that, yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Could you tell a little bit more about your experience in Lyme disease, which became a real public problem?
Right, this has been written by a girl from Hemel Hempstead in England. She had Lyme disease for 9 years. For 3 of those years, she was in bed, wearing a blindfold and earmuffs. Even light and sound were pain for her. It's the worst case I've ever heard of. 9 years, 3.5 years in bed. She took GcMAF for 6 months. Well, actually, she reckons she was back to normal at 3 months. But now she's job hunting, completely normal life. So she's gone from being completely incapacitated in bed to being a normal person again. She's very, very thin, but everything is working. I met her in London, we had a coffee, she caught the train. She's completely recovered. And we do have a very good success rate. I can take any disease, plug it into the system, and get a list of how many people were on GcMAF or GcMAF and what the results were. So I could actually come up with a number, and it might be something like 40 people, and it's probably about 80% success. So yes, we're very successful with Lyme disease.
I can attest to that. I went and met the young lady concerned myself about a month after David did, and she tells a very moving story, actually, of her suffering for 9 years and absolutely no energy. As David said, 3 years, I think it was a bit more than 3 years in bed. And she had run out of hope and quite accidentally came across GcMAF. And I tell you, I'm not as young as I was. I had trouble keeping up with her when we were walking. She was full of energy, full of vitality, and a real testament to the success of the treatment that she'd had.